All right, and we're live. We're live. Hello, everyone. I know we got folks joining us from all over. We have a tradition of if you feel like sharing where you're joining us from, we always love to hear it. If you know someone on stage and you want to say hello to them, feel free to add a comment in the notes. We have a few teammates who are standing by. They're not on screen here, but they're standing by. So if you have questions during the presentation today or during the webinar today, what it's really going to be is kind of a roundtable. We'd love to hear them. And whether we're able to answer them now or answer them in follow-ups or at the end of the session today, please do feel free to add questions, comments, etc. If we see a comment that might be helpful for us to discuss more, we'll take the liberty to dive into those comments and questions. But we're going to give folks just one more minute to join here. In the meantime, just so everyone knows that they're in the right place, we'll put this up on screen. You are at the next evolution of STR data and technology, featuring a bunch of folks who I love talking to, I love hearing from. Should be a really fun discussion today. All right, team. Are you ready to go?
We are. Looks like some people are having a problem with audio. You might make sure some other people can hear. Okay. It's good for some, bad for others. Everybody adjust on their own.
Okay. Let me see. Can folks, I guess if some of our audio is off, if you would, if you could tell me, Andrew, your audio sounds terrible or garbled, please let me know. We'd actually love to hear that. So, yeah, please do let us know. But with that, so we're going to dive into what we're going to discuss today. I think the goal of today's roundtable / webinar / discussion is to get a bunch of people together who think really about different aspects of our industry, from the data perspective, from the software perspective, from the automation perspective, and really give you tips about what guest data is out there, what operational data is out there, what pricing or competitive set data is out there. We all of us think about data almost probably too much. But today what we wanted to share were tips that we have learned in the space, tips we've learned from customers who we think are running their businesses in really unique or interesting ways, tips we might have picked up from other industries. And we're going to take the liberty of having a few structured questions and then kind of take the conversation anywhere. And again, if you if someone who has joined has an interesting thing you'd like us to discuss, we're welcome to kind of answering your questions as we go. So without further ado, we're going to do intros. Jeremy, if you'd like to start, that would be great. And then we'll kick it around the horn.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. It's Jeremy Gall. I'm the founder and CEO of Breezeway. I'll give a quick sort of intro. And I like the way we were talking about this, which is about we all come from different perspectives in the industry. We've got like a lot of different history here. So mine comes first from starting a company called FlipKey, marketplace for vacation rentals, way back in 2006. I was talking to some folks about this at FocusWire yesterday. And it's like, we forget that in 2006, like you couldn't book online. Nobody had guest reviews. Maybe you were sitting at home as a traveler, like waiting for the catalog to come so you could figure out what the rental prices were this year. And when you start to think about it, you're like, wow, that is totally crazy. But that was the world then. Started FlipKey, sold it to TripAdvisor, learned a lot about the marketing side and learned from friends like Jason what it was like on the maintenance side and property operations. And so, started Breezeway after FlipKey to help people with operations, automation, and really leveraging property data, which we'll talk about today. Thanks for having me.
Jeremy. Jason, before I have you go, we are still seeing a few questions with the audio. I'm curious. Let me just see here quickly if
yeah, it seems like it's 50-50.
Okay, other people are saying it's still good for me. So those who are having audio troubles, the audio appears to be working. So maybe in your settings in the upper right, I'm sorry, I can't help you more. There might be a way, but we will be sharing out this video afterwards and recording afterwards. So at worst, we'll make sure to get you, every single person who signed up will get this video afterwards. So apologize for that. But Jason, why don't you take it away and share some of your amazing story in this space too, please?
Yeah, appreciate it. First of all, excited to be here with everybody, particularly this panel. I've been in the space for 15 years now, I think. Was an operator kind of at the core with a company called 360 Blue, and had a really fun ride with that. We exited it back in August. And so kind of learned a lot along that journey, particularly with, the timing of the exit and kind of how that process went. We bought some companies along the way and ultimately sold it at the end. Grew a company, which I completely blame Jeremy for, because I went to a show. He was talking about 2006. It was probably 2008 or 10 or somewhere around then when I went to a show and I saw the company that he had built, and I, for just lack of judgment, decided I wanted to be like him and do the same. And so we built Glad to Have You, ran it for a few years and sold it to HomeAway. And then I saw he was doing it again and I refused to be outdone. So we started another one here with Key Data. And it goes pretty deep. If you notice the picture behind him, very similar, total copy job. That's the first time I've seen that. That's just awkward.
Wait till Jason shaves his beard tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. So no, a big fan, learning a lot, and excited to be here to share some insights with you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Jason. Love it. Andrew, please take it away.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Bate with Safely.com. I'm based in Atlanta and have been at it for a while too. Actually started my first vacation rental company in 2007. And it was called Trusted Guests, because the problem I was trying to solve and still trying to solve is, how do you get people who own a second home, who are leaving it empty for 48 weeks of the year, start to rent it and feel comfortable with internet strangers who are coming into their house, sleeping in their beds, using their space. And so first one was building a marketplace. And of course, Jeremy was the leader in that. You look to him as someone I admired, someone who started a company that was getting great traction and changing the industry as well. And then, in 2013, we switched to a different model. It was actually Carl Shepard at HomeAway who said, Andrew, don't build a marketplace and compete with us. Just make every reservation a little safer. So what we do now is we do the right background check on a guest. We have a database of bad guests who have destroyed homes, should never go into your house. And then the right insurance policy. We cover up to $1 million of damage to the home structure. $0 deductibles, like really anything that's related to the stay is going to be covered. And that's what we do at Safely.com.
Excellent. And I'm Andrew, CEO of Wheelhouse. We do some pricing stuff. I'm here to interview and engage in conversation with a bunch of folks today who know data and software and automation inside and out from a whole bunch of different perspectives. All right, all. So we're gonna start with a question, and we're gonna reverse the order this time. I'm gonna go to Andrew, you first, then Jason and Jeremy. And the first one is just an opener of, what is the one stat you advise customers know, track, or understand in order for them to better understand their business and operations and how they can improve?
Yeah, there are two things. First is be worried, but then second is don't be worried. So in general, only about 3% of all reservations that we see have some sort of a claim, insurance claim. And some of them are minor, like some of them are massive. We'll talk about that later. That's interesting, it's scary, it's cocktail party fodder, but really 3% of reservations have something where there's some financial damage, and that's manageable. So that's the one number. But then, put your worried hat on. There are 14% of guests, a profile of guests who are causing 70% of the bad stays. And you know this, if you've been in the business long enough, like when they book, you can almost tell. When they come into your house, you're like, oh, geez, I know how this plays out. And so there is a profile, and we'll talk more about it, but is those two. First, in general, this is a pretty good, pretty safe, pretty good place to be. But second, you got to be careful.
Slice that data as you get in further and understand those guests, et cetera. But those are great. So it sounds like 3% of stays, there's an issue that hits an insurance company like you all, and that 70% of all issues are caused by a relatively small percentage of guests. Excellent. Good to know. Jason, what do you advise people pay attention to?
Man, I'm gonna picking one as a data guy is difficult, and so I'm gonna pick one that none of us measure at a fairness. I would measure, if I could only measure one thing, the the type of calls that are coming into my vacation rental industry, and I would track that data religiously, and I would understand how that changes over time on a daily, if not weekly basis. Meaning, I got a call a minute ago for an appliance repair. I got a call for a cleaning issue. I got a call to book that came through Verbo, or I got a direct call. You start to look at the data that flows out of segmenting your incoming calls and what's causing them, and you work backwards. It's so diagnostic of what's going on in your business, and my increasing the number of calls I get for appliances or dirty floors or happy guests or guests that are checking in early or late. Like just watching that one chart, I've seen it transform businesses from 360 Blue on, and so many people don't measure that. So put that at the top of my tips of data that was impactful to me as an operator.
I love that. Is there any quick tips on best practices there, or is there a?
Yeah, I mean, the tip for me is get started. I mean, it doesn't matter if you track it in Excel or a fancy software platform. If you're not tracking it and you literally just have your reservationist team write it down and put tick boxes on the 10 columns and start to refine what those columns are, it won't be 2 weeks before you start to get some insights. It's so much better than an anecdotal conversation with your team leads or your business partners about how was the weekend. Oh, well, we got a few calls for this or that. The data will show you so much more. And, I'm a track the data guy, but it's insightful.
I love that because as someone who's also operated business in this space too, there's kind of the perfect side of data, or an automation, which is what a lot of us spend our time on. But those basic early first steps of even just tracking stuff in Excel really can drive some good business outcomes. So awesome ad. Jeremy, tough to follow that one. No, you ready with the stat?
No pressure. All right. The two stats. One, something to keep in mind, and then one tip to track. Sort of taking a page from Andrew, which is, 88% of managers in a survey we just did are basically digging in. They're thinking about how they're going to optimize their business with technology to, differentiate their service. Like basically the industry is moving towards, which I don't think is a surprise, but it's a stark, high number, right? That the industry is moving towards we need technology to help differentiate our business. So I think that's something people should keep in mind. And then a stat to track, owner satisfaction would be the stat that I would say people should pay attention to. And I think it's also one that gets missed a ton. People forget there's so much, and understandably, right? No judgment. There's so much to pay attention to. RevPAR, your guest reviews, your team efficiency. We're inundated with data, but I think it becomes too easy to forget, what have I got for owner satisfaction? Am I keeping my owners happy? And that's more than the revenue that I'm delivering to them.
Jeremy, I was going to say, I remember being afraid to ask, for a few years. It's almost like I thought I was going to benefit from not getting that survey out there, whether it's a net promoter score or a simple form stack or something, and then seeing the data for the first time and being surprised in many ways. I think that's a huge one. I think you're dead on.
Way to measure that, is it just a simple quick survey, 1 to 10? How am I doing? Any other thoughts?
I think that's right. I think the simple NPS survey, 1 to 10, how am I doing? But then really digging in, and I think it invites a conversation so that you can understand how you really are doing with those owners. Because I think we all know as operators, that's why you lose. Some owners you want to lose. Some, the bottom 10% of your pool, maybe you do want to get rid of them. But there's plenty that you don't, and you don't want to be surprised by that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I know at Lyric, we didn't necessarily have owners, but we had building groups, and we started interviewing them all the time, saying, how are we doing? How are our guests doing coming into the homes, et cetera? But it's almost that operational side of the business where some of that data, Jeremy, Baz, you're able to capture some data, but also some of it you just have to get through sentiment surveys or analysis, whether it's your guests or your owners or whoever you may be working with. I love that. So moving on to kind of question number 2, and Jason, we'll go to you first. for this one. I'm curious what you think the short-term rental space can learn from other industries. And I think the industry we most often kind of think about learning from is the hotel industry, even though I might argue that I think our space is going to teach the hotel industry a whole lot in the coming years. But are there other industries that you can think of or that use data in different ways in the short-term rental space that's today that you think we should look to for guidance?
Yeah, I mean, two ways. I'll give you two answers. One is just one that's kind of near and dear to kind of where we're tracking, right? Like we started out at the very beginning and said, look, if we're going to build a revenue management platform, no better place to go than the hotel experts, figure out how they do revenue management, hire the best in the world and bring them over here and teach us how to build a platform. What we learned quickly is what most people on the phone probably instinctively already know, which is we're a lot different than hotels, right? The complexity of what we deal with, beyond the fact that our hotels are spread out across 20, 100, 200 miles, 6 cities sometimes. They're all individual units. They're all individual problems. There's just a lot of things complex about revenue management because we don't have 200 rooms that look alike. We have 200 properties that are unique in terms of how they need to be priced and the amenities and the location. And so it feels almost unfair that we have a vastly more complex framework to deal with, and they've got these massive tool sets that they've used forever. And so what we learned is those revenue managers and tools just didn't translate to our space, and we were all going to have to collectively figure it out together. So one of the things that they do that I am anxious to kind of bring over into the space on the revenue management side is kind of the sophisticated reports that we don't hear a lot about that are just germane to their everyday usage. One of them is a pickup report. And you'll see more and more revenue managers out there talking about it, but it's just not part of the day-to-day vernacular. So I want to get that in kind of with what we're doing with Wheelhouse and you guys. And then there's like an indexing report, which is to me kind of benchmarking on steroids. And it's just a very formalized way of seeing how much you're getting in terms of your share of the market. Hotels live and breathe off of it. It's not part of our vernacular. And so I would couch those as kind of a group of sophisticated revenue management practices or tools that the hotels are relying upon that I still think we need to bring over to our space and start to benefit from. And then the second point of the answer is there are still those 5-star hotels that you walk in, and if you're lucky enough to walk in, and they know your name and they remember what you like, and they have done a fantastic job of tracking your preferences. And they know that you stayed in their hotel down the road last year. They know that you brought kids, and they're just ahead of the game. And I've yet to really see a technology in our space allow us to easily accomplish that. I see a lot of people yearning for it, but I'm anxious to get that from the luxury hotels. I'm anxious for when your maintenance guy shows up at the vacation rental door, he knows that it's Mr. Thompson that's staying with you, and he knows he stayed with you 10 times before. And you ought to say, welcome back, Mr. Thompson, instead of, hey, I understand you're having a problem with your washer or dryer. And so I yearn for that. I think they got that on us.
Wow. Who wants to go next? Should we just wrap on that or what?
I'm counting on Jeremy to build that, by the way.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. I mean, Andrew at Wheelhouse, what about you though? Like when that always fascinates me. Like that was my big takeaway from Amy Hinote's data conference in Atlanta, which was like, hotels and vacation rentals, we try to treat them the same for revenue management, but it's different, right? And the homes aren't so fungible. The owners might not even be trying to maximize. You may have a profile of inventory where that owner's not actually trying to maximize revenue. That's not actually what they want. How do you think about that at Wheelhouse?
Oh, I love it. Thank you for turning. Okay. A couple things. So there are some things about the short-term rental space that make it harder to price than hotels. Those things include essentially every piece of inventory is unique. Sometimes you have limited booking history. You have flexible supply in many markets, like you mentioned. Some inventories, it comes online or it disappears, and it does so in a little bit more unpredictable fashion in the hotel space. There's a whole bunch of attributes, right? So hotel rooms, you're kind of buying a bed and a television. In the short-term rental space, you might be paying for a pool, porch, patio, Wi-Fi, parking, and that might change on Tuesday, right? So in some ways, all that information makes price in the short-term rental space hard. What makes price in the short-term rental space in some ways easier is we can see individual actions taking place on all of those different inventory types. So we're able to say, how are 2 bedrooms doing on a particular day? How are 2 bedrooms with pools doing on a particular day? And we can see those bookings across marketplaces either through some combination of kind of collecting and cleaning data or from data partnerships that kind of pump that data into us. But I guess when I think about pricing, I really want to understand, I want to understand, much like Jason said, that comp set and the kind of RevPAR index, you got to get the right comp set and then understand how you're performing against that comp set. And RevPAR index, in my mind, is the best way to do that. I think that's kind of the generic revenue management advice I would give. I think the really interesting piece of data that we were extremely curious to understand at Lyric is actually around merchandising, right? And in the short-term rental space, I often say that we are in the business of selling 24 photos. That is our advertising platform to get people to come buy our homes. And we have a storyboard there. We can tell about our hosting. So I cannot tell you, I can actually say we have not run enough A/B tests yet to understand how photo order and how that narrative really impacts your likelihood to convert to a sale. And I'm dying for our space to get really, really, really good at merchandising, either individually on a direct site or on OTAs. And on the OTA side, I'm very interested in who's going to be the first one to start to kind of show search results that look a little bit, that make our spaces look a little different than a hotel room. Who's going to be the first one to show 3 photos of a short-term rental next to 1 photo of a boring hotel room? So merchandising is the thing I'm most interested in kind of pushing forwards. Very long-winded answer, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting though. I think it's really interesting. We could talk for ages about, like, we experiment a lot at FlipKey with sort order, default photos, changing property descriptions. I know Carl Shepard, I know those guys experimented a lot with that as well, rewriting descriptions and titles for people on their behalf to make them more, make them more appealable to travelers. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting on the inventory side of things and what Jason was saying about taking from hotels.
Yeah. And Jeremy, even on that, and then we'll come back to both you and Andrew answering this question. I think there's, we all know that we have kind of multiple different types of customers. Depending on where your property is, you might have some business travelers and some leisure travelers. You might have a blend of it. You might have families coming. The reality is you're going to merchandise with those folks differently, or you would in an ideal world, right? It's like how when someone's shopping online, you have a different advertisement based on who they are. And I just think that merchandising thing is where our space, we have the ability to tell better stories than hotels. We do.
So I got a question for Jeremy off of that, because I haven't heard anybody talk about it in our framework is merchandising, right? It's got me thinking, I see our space somewhat transitioning to what I think of as, standardization, right? Like I see Marriott coming in, and from there, and they're pushing for things to look more and more like the Lyrics of the world, put inventory out there. It was kind of a predictable look. Jeremy's company is very much helping us mature into a space where, we're likely to have less bedspreads that are filthy and things in the house that aren't the way they're supposed to be, because, you've got this pathway where you can check it and you can make sure it's safe and you can make sure it's what you'd expect. But there's this trade-off between standardization and uniqueness, right? That comes with the beauty of vacation rentals. So I'm curious, y'all's perspective, and Jeremy in particular, on the tool set, like, where's that balance between making the units very predictable and keeping them unique, like in terms of the data? You want it clean, but you also want it unique. Like I remember arguing with homeowners about, listen, your bedspread is lovely, and I know you just bought it, but it's not. We need standardization on the bedspread. You can have uniqueness on the, the countertops or something.
Yeah, we don't use the word. I just wrote down. I wrote down standardization with an arrow pointing, horizontally over towards professionalize. Yeah, and I don't really love the word standardize. Because I don't think that's really it. I do love professionalize, because I think that's what Marriott should be focused on at their scale. I know standardization is important, and the bedspreads are a perfect example, right? Like there's a level where you at scale cannot professionalize without some standardization. around certain elements like bedspreads or other things where you just don't have any choice. It's too much of a burden. And you're not going to get you're not delivering a ton of value to the experience of the guest by having a whole bunch of unique bedspreads, right? Like they're not going to place a lot of value on that, or they shouldn't if they know better. So we think about professionalization more than standardization. And I think it's like, I think that's where, I mean, Jason knows this. We think that that's where everything is headed, whether you have 1,000 units, 100 units, or you just have one. Like there will be a time soon, which is again, much, much different than 2006, where there just isn't space for the hobbyist anymore. That doesn't mean there isn't space for uniqueness. That definitely doesn't mean there isn't space for hosts. But there isn't space for hosts who don't really want to do it well. Because that doesn't do anybody any good. And I think we're just going to keep seeing the powers that be like stack up against those people, right? The marketplaces don't want them. The regulators don't want them. The property managers don't want them. Associations don't want them. They are, they're persona non grata around here. And I think that's how it's going to have to be.
Do you and Andrew see a place for standardization when it comes to safety? It seems like there's just this giant gap where you guys are starting to both teach us that, hey, there's some things that we ought to expect of our own selves as an industry in terms of safety that we're almost going to have to self-police, right?
And that's an area where we overlap a lot. How you prepare a home for the next guest, or clean it from before, or operationalize it, standardize it, professionalize it. Safety is a really big piece of it, and especially this year, safety is so much of a bigger piece of it than it was a year and a half ago. And so really we try to get as many of our property managers and homeowners to operationalize. Is so a little bit different than professionalize, but operationalize. Check those carbon monoxide detectors, check the fire detectors, like do the right things, just systematically do the right things with your swimming pool, with your fireplaces. And as long as there's an operating process that can be tracked, now we can be proactive. And that's another term that Jason, as you were talking about, the Ritz-Carlton, it's an area that I think we can all be a lot better at, and that's being proactive. And we try to be proactive with data to say, if there's a high risk guest, we still want them to stay in the house. Like, this is revenue, and especially if they're coming into shoulder season, like, we really want them to stay in the house. But how can we steer them to make a really good decision so that they are a great guest and we're proactive? Maybe we bring them cookies every night, not because we want to bring them cookies, but just so they know that, oh, we're next door, and we know if there are going to be 60 people who show up at the house. Right. And so the data allows us to be proactive, but also allows us to professionalize.
Well said.
I love it.
It's a lot of cookies.
It's 3%.
What type?
A lot of cookies.
Hey, I'd like that delivery. Okay. Actually, Andrew, you mind if I double click with you for a second? Because I do think in some ways, again, this question about safety is so unique in the short-term rental space, right? Often, again, so many guests are new to the category right now. It's hard to think about. There's a bunch of probably dangers in analyzing guests too much. There could be some things that emerge, but I guess I'm curious, like, what have you learned from other industries or from the hotel space in terms of thinking about safety and thinking about what operators or professionals who are on this webinar might be able to bring into their own business?
Yeah, there's one thing we hear a lot, especially from people with higher end homes. They say, "Oh, well, we have a nice home, so we don't have any problems." And then I say, "All right, how many bedrooms do you have? What's your ADR?" "Well, it's $600. And how many bedrooms do you have?" "All right, we've got 6 bedrooms." "All right, well, that's cheaper than the Best Western." You really think you're in this whole new category, but your cost per person, especially when they plow as many people in as possible, like, you're at risk. And so that's just one misconception that I want a lot of homeowners to like just get past. The second is in terms of safety. I mean, there's of course the virus safety, which we don't touch that as much, but there's also like the right guests, because some guests are just, when you can start to identify why they're having a stay, and you can't discriminate against people who are going on a bachelor party, but people who are going on a bachelor party are different than people going to an insurance conference. That's our space. Insurance conferences are really boring. The same person can be really boring, but also a really high risk guest and create quite a safety hazard for you. If they get hurt, it's your fault or your homeowner's fault if you're a property manager. And so really it's just, if you can start to predict behaviors or anticipate high risk behaviors, that's going to create a safer experience for everyone.
Yeah. Are there things like, what little sneaky ways can you use to predict dangerous situations?
Yeah. So what's interesting is most of the predictors of whether a guest is going to be a bad guest, it has nothing to do with whether they're a member of a protected class, which means the data that does become relevant is available for all of us to use. Here it is, this Thursday. If we want to have a party, we're probably going to book yesterday or today. We're going to book for this weekend. It'll be a 2-night stay because one night they won't allow us to do one night. So we'll do 2 nights. It'll be within an hour and a half of our primary home. I'm in Atlanta, so we'll go up to the Blue Ridge Mountains. We'll go somewhere like that. It'll be a short stay. It'll be close to the guest primary residence. And then there's a really good chance that the maximum stated occupancy, the ratio between maximum stated occupancy and number of beds, that ratio is going to be pretty wide. So we see even the same home, if you say we have 6 bedrooms, you say it'll sleep 12 people. Okay, that's great. Then you say, well, you can sleep up to 45 in here. Well, all of a sudden, the same house that has the same risk characteristics, we see completely different behaviors just based on how it's listed. So those are just a couple. But as everyone knows, last-minute stays, bad, local guests, but local not just within 20 minutes, but local within 2 hours.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So maybe asking where someone's coming in from, et cetera, if they're doing a last-minute booking in particular.
Especially if you can verify their ID and see their driver's license, then that's really important. No one, like Hawaii is one of our safest markets because almost no one just drops by for the weekend. And so, like you don't gather a whole party. It's a controlled, planned event. People are very civilized, but lots happens, in the outskirts of the urban areas.
I'm sure we all now want to know what the most dangerous markets are, but we won't ask that now. We'll do
Los Angeles. I have to say, Los Angeles is horrible.
We'll do a separate breakout. Clearly, we're only into kind of question 1.5 right now, and we've got a bunch prepared, so we might have to do this again. I guess, Jeremy, before moving on, is there any other industry or any kind of final notes that you'd add here? Are there other industries that you think operators, professionals can learn from in terms of looking to them for how they're using data or software or automation to drive their business forward?
Yeah, I think well, the reason I started another company in the vacation rental space, because I think it's so interestingly situated right in between hospitality and every other type of property management and really logistics. And so I think like the trick to being a really great operator in this business is to like leverage what Jason's saying and saying like, how do we behave like 5-star hospitality service? And like, how do we make sure we deliver that? And let me keep my Four Seasons hat on, and then let me switch and let me put on, pick your favorite logistics company, like maybe Walmart. Let me put on my Walmart hat and let me think about like, what is it like to be a logistics company and like try and execute on this incredibly complex operational task that I have, which is turning over all these properties, maintaining unique properties, delivering them at a professional level where it can be a predictable experience for people. Because if I can't do that and I can't coordinate all these pieces, I can't possibly deliver Four Seasons like service to my guests. So I think the other industry people need to look to is like logistics industries who are like, then every piece of data matters. I've got to be super efficient and effective because my margins are tight. And that's true in this industry too.
I love that. Jason, did you want to add something there, or do you mind if I share a thought on that?
No, go, yeah.
I was just thinking back at Lyric, we did an exercise probably every 3 months we kick this off again, but we draw out the customer journey. And we would write down like, what are the moments they're shopping online, they're making a purchase, they're calling for confirmation, they arrive in the market, they arrive in the city, they arrive at the door, they first check in, and we all mapped it all the way through checkout. And we thought about those kind of all those different moments where someone could have an inconvenience and how to measure those. And then how to make sure that like, there's no way you're providing a good hospitality experience if your guests can't get in the front door.
Exactly.
Right. That's a nonsense. I mean, sometimes you can make up for it. Sometimes you make up lost ground by being courteous and bringing cookies, but mapping out that customer journey and starting to apply data points to that and thinking about, Jeremy, to your point, like what would Walmart do when you walked into the store? They'd say hello.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Back of house operations, right? Like I've never heard, again, merchandising and logistics, 2 words I don't hear too much in vacation rental conferences, but I got a brother-in-law who's a logistics engineer and runs major warehouses. And if you think about how he runs his warehouse versus how we approach ours, from a linen, soaps, inventory, air filters, 200 people coming and going, like ours aren't any less complex, but we just kind of put it over there and we hire a young kid who goes and runs it. Like we could deeply benefit. I think Jeremy's onto something of thinking about it from a logistics management role. Like the hard part about vacation rentals is getting all those little things that your software tries to help us do better, Jeremy, right? If you can nail those, the rest of it's kind of that, keep your hat on in 4 seasons, but that's the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
here's a tip to sort of bookend both of your comments, if I could, which is like, then what's interesting is when you map out that journey, and you think about the duality of logistics and hospitality, then you bring it together as a property management company and you think to yourself, okay, these are all the points that I have to do. Like, which ones of these can I automate away? Because I can really automate it and it's still going to deliver and remove that inconvenience. Which ones do I not want to automate away? And I really want to put human capital at because it's going to make for that hospitality service. And you pick and choose where you're really going to invest, because you can't do that everywhere. Just like you can't automate it. You don't want to automate it all because then you're way far away from the 4 seasons. And you can't afford to do it all by hand and do it all with like super high concierge service. So you got to pick and choose.
I like, for me, if I were to take a bet, is our space going to continue to attract more kind of professional travelers, business travelers, families, older travelers, et cetera? Or is it going to attract more backpackers? It's like, no, it started with backpackers and bachelor parties. Our guests are professionalizing.
Yeah.
What your guests expected a year ago is going to be different, right? And I agree with, I agree, Jeremy, with your earlier point about like, hey, the industry is moving a particular way. Whether it's the marketplaces, they want the professional supply, regulators want professional supply, and candidly, a higher quantity of guests, yes, even though they're going to want uniqueness, they're going to find uniqueness in having a space with a bunch of the amenities you already have. So I do think that the professionalization of the guest, which is what every marketplace is trying to bring in, those professional corporate travelers, right? Important to think that like our guests are professionalizing too, and they're going to have different expectations that really speak to the operationalization of all these things. Okay, we probably have time for one more question. Now I know also, I think a few folks might have had some questions for other panelists that they wanted to throw out. Does anyone have a question they want to throw out? Feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'll throw another one at us.
Hey, can I know these guys won't brag on each other, but I sat down the other day to make a list of webinars that I thought Key Data could host that had nothing to do with Key Data, that would just be informative, that I wish I could have set on back when I had 360. One of them was branding. We'll skip that. I think branding's critical. I still want to host that one. But the other 2 that I came up with were insurance and safety. And I made that list after I said in a presentation in St. Augustine that Justin Ford, who works with Jeremy, did on safety. And I looked back and I said, and Andrew and I talked about it yesterday, I feel like there are very few, like if we were giving ourselves scorecards as operators, I feel like there are very few vacation rental companies that get safety right and treat it like they should treat it, and that understand insurance requirements, because it's so easy to put those 2 on the bottom of the list. And there's such easy ways to get in trouble and just get things wrong. And so if I walked out of this webinar with a takeaway, I would put on my list to go back and gut check where I am with understanding insurance, and do my owners have the right insurance, and am I covered, and do I really have my arms around it? Because I guarantee you very few do. And two is like, are we really safety checking our units, and are we doing what we ought to be doing? Are we certified? Are we listening to what Justin says? This stuff is not theoretical. We had 4 homes burned down on our program over 13 years. Nothing we did wrong, but I see balconies collapsing and people slipping and falling, and it's just part of the space. And you could stop now, put those 2 on your list, and do something that would have a big impact on your company that I know most of us aren't doing. So, point I wanted to make.
Andrew, you can go if you want. I'll add something after.
Yeah, the one thing that I want to make sure everyone understands is, like, if you're running a business in your home, you need business insurance. Like, that is just, it's non-negotiable. You need business insurance, and there are lots of ways of getting it. I mean, a lot of insurance agents aren't very sophisticated, but somehow you either need a commercial rider that attaches your own insurance policy, and then that homeowner can add the property manager as a named insured. It's not perfect, but you can do that. The second thing is, of course, we have a per night insurance policy. So you get commercial when you need commercial. You don't get commercial when you don't need commercial. We think that's the right way of doing it, but the key here is you need commercial insurance. The other thing is, a lot of property managers think that in their legal agreements, they say, oh, we're not liable. And it's like, you can write whatever you want in your agreement, and it's helpful to say that you're not liable. But once you're negligent for something, and that's not keeping your properties up to code, once you're negligent, no one can sign away your negligence. So it's, again, contracts are good, but they are not your protection. They're not your bulletproof protection. So those are just 2 things to think through, that no matter how you solve it, just know that they are real issues.
Yeah, I would just add on the safety side, Justin's dedicated his career to this. We're fortunate to work with him at Breezeway, but he really is so incredibly knowledgeable about it. And I think you're right. It's hard for, on the one hand, it falls to the bottom of the list. On the other hand, there are lots of managers and professionals who care. Obviously, they care about what's happening at their property. I think it just takes like this extra level of dedication and staying on top of it and really keeping it top of mind. And I think I think there's ways people can build it into their owner programs as well. You should be charging for that. It's another ancillary service you're providing to your owners. You don't have to take it on the chin. You should be charging them, making them feel really good about what's going on in their property. And it's great. Like, I encourage people, think about that as like off-season opportunity. You need to keep people moving and working off-season. This is a great way to like build off-season maintenance revenue, and build into your program in a way to engage your owners and stay top of mind with them. So happy to talk more about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really big thing. I'd love to hear, Andrew from Wheelhouse. I mean, you've been generous with all the questions to everybody else, but I mean, I think like, it's really interesting. I think I'd love to hear, my question for you and sort of Jason was like, everyone's been whiplashed over the last 12 months, basically going to zero, coming back full strength, maybe not seeing an off season. Now, 4th of July is around the corner. They're whipping right into another big season, and demand is through the roof, right? Like, how are you thinking about adjusting, the data profiles that people need, the revenue algorithms, when the landscape is shifting underneath you? It's got to be incredibly interesting, and I'm sure there's something you can tell the audience about how you've been doing that.
Love it. Jason, I don't know. You want to go first, bud?
No, you take that one.
Okay. So, and Jeremy, your question is, everything's different now. Can you, when you think about pricing strategy, what should you think about? Right. So, Jason Sprinkle and I both, our teams work really closely together now, but we both are looking at data to help people derive more revenue from their assets. And it's true that, whereas some markets are booming and some are still struggling, in particular urban areas are still struggling, there are a few things that have changed: length of stay, lead times, and things have shifted in a lot of markets. What the short-term rental space ironically had to overinvest in early is something that I call reactive modeling. And reactive modeling is saying, hey, we've got all this historic data, and that historic data can help with kind of predicting seasonality and kind of day of week curves and things like that can demand signals basically. And then we also have we can look forward to kind of pricing signal what hotels, airlines, other short-term rentals are charging for particular dates, and we can leverage those pricing signals to make a kind of a accurate-ish price recommendation for your property in the far future. That's kind of called predictive modeling. Reactive modeling is saying, well, all that historic data and all that price signal are either a relic of the past or a guess in the case of a price signal about what's going to happen. But the main thing that matters is booking signal. So what Wheelhouse is overinvested in is something called reactive modeling that looks at booking signals near you to say, who cares what people thought they're going to be able to get? What's the market actually doing on a particular day? And our model, I would say, is really good at figuring out how to translate booking patterns into price recommendations, into price changes. And the reason that's different than hotels is hotels kind of had all the historic data where they were looking at their pacing curve and their other things and their comp set, which is very easy to define in ways that allowed them to put together relatively sophisticated pricing strategies. And the short-term rental space, even figuring out your comp set was hard. So what Wheelhouse has done on the reactive modeling side is we're really good at identifying who are your true competitors in your market, how are they booking, and how can we leverage those booking signals before your place books to price you accurately. So reactive modeling is something we've way over invested in. It means in times like COVID, our model's okay because we're responding to those booking signals that have already changed. We're not tied to what we thought the market was going to do 2 years ago. It's an input, but not the foundation. That historic data is an input, but not the foundation of our pricing. Jason.
Great. Yeah. I mean, for me, kind of in simpleton terms, the opportunity and the fear is, we went from 0 to what probably feels like 150 miles an hour for most people. And so a lot of people have had that kind of thoughtful, but in somewhat also just because of the timing, knee-jerk reaction where they've just pushed rates up and then they kind of play with, are they still calling or do we need to bring them down enough? But we saw rates go up in a lot of these markets on average booked, 50+% and fill up for the summer still. And so, two things to think about, and not to go back to product for us, but we both have these custom comp set products that are out on the market now, Andrew. For me, and we're just kind of starting to take this out there and teach it, but benchmarking tells you one thing, right? So if you're trying to figure out like how far can I push that, what is the true demand in my space? What can I get away with in terms of pricing, which I think we're all still kind of testing the limits of, right? Fall still booked crazy, so there's still opportunity, but you don't want to push it too far. So looking up and seeing who else in your market, how they're pricing and how you relate to them at the macro level is where benchmarking comes in. Like, how are my 4 bedrooms in this stretch of the beach or the mountains doing versus others? Benchmarking does that, but it stops short at a point, right? Like it just tells you at a macro level for a property type or company type how you're performing. Where these custom comp set tools that are pretty new to the space and brand new for us come in is they allow you to get very micro. So forget 4 bedrooms on the slope or 4 bedrooms along the coast. For these particular units, how are my competitors, my specific property competitors pricing, and who's getting away with it and who's not? And being able to go in and take a property or a property type in a condo or in a neighborhood and acutely look at like, okay, here's 10 other properties that are just like mine. And you get to see in live form exactly the ones that are pricing higher than you, lower than you, same as you, way lower than you, way higher than you. And you can see who's winning. And so just being able to look at that now and say, oh my gosh, that house 2 doors down, or that condo that's the exact same condo as mine, they just got a blue couch and I got a red couch. They're getting away with $200 more a night than me. Like, I would say take the data, of course, and pay attention to how far you can push that demand. Understand that at the macro level with benchmarking and understand that at the micro level with comp sets. Then you can not feel so yanked by the 0 to 120 to Jeremy's point. You can feel like, okay, I know this thing is a roller coaster, but I've got the benefit of looking at the numbers and watching them, and I can see people who are pricing higher and I can see people who are pricing lower, and I can tell what's working. It's a little bit simpler than it feels of just like, for God's sakes, raise the prices and let's hope that they keep booking. Hope is not a strategy, as my old business partner used to say.
It's interesting granularity though, right? Like I think you're talking about like an interesting level of granularity on the property type. And that's what I've talked to Andrew about as well, which is, and Jason, we've chatted a little bit about this too.
Yeah.
That like, it's going to become really, really interesting. Like I'm waiting for the day, and I think we'll get there. And maybe the three of, maybe we'll get there together where, we can feed even more granular property data into the system so that you can make those comparisons, those micro comparisons, even more accurately, either within your own portfolio or, your portfolio and your largest and your next competitors.
Andrew and I are both counting on you feeding us some data at the super micro level that allows us to do A/B testing. I think that's our future, right? Is to really be able to go in and hone in the uniqueness of these properties from a pricing standpoint.
I love it. A couple things, because we're gonna, even though it's so fun, we could go for hours. We're gonna wrap, unfortunately, but we're gonna do a little closeout. I think there's one thing, Jeremy, that you just brought up actually a few minutes ago that I thought was really a really great tip, which was thinking about how to turn things we normally think about cost centers into profit centers. And like with Andrew and Safely, I always people think about insurance as a cost. It's like, well, no, if your guests are paying for that cost, you can turn that into a profit center and sell them on a safer stay. They're not taking a financial risk either now, right? There's a lot of interesting ways you can turn what were costs into profit centers. And I guarantee you, if you can come to an owner or an investor, someone and say, hey, we figured out a way to turn a cost center into a profit center, it's good for the business. Very strong.
It's really compelling. And as Jeremy was mentioning too, like your homeowners want this. This is the first thing they have to get over before they start renting for the first time. It's like, am I comfortable with this? Now we'll figure out how much money can I make. And then same with us, the insurance, like the guests would prefer to pay $50 non-refundable instead of put down $1,200 that's hopefully refundable. And then they've got all this anxiety when they walk in the house. Are you charging me for that or that? So you're 100% right. When you create value, you can monetize it.
Love it. Okay, all. So quick closeout. We're going to go around the horn. Jason Sprinkle, we're going to start with you first. I guess what we'll do for a closeout is, I would just say, can you share what's one thing everyone on this call should do today to incorporate one thing you've heard into their business? What's one thing you heard today or one thing you brought today to the table that you really want to double click on? We'll do kind of a double click for everyone on the call. We'll go Jason, Andrew, Jeremy, and then we'll say goodbye to everyone. And we thank you all for joining us.
I'm cheating. I'm doing 4, but one word answers. Number 1, check out our custom comp sets. I think it's a game changer. 2 is figure out your safety plan. Go call Justin or Jeremy and get certified so you don't have people falling off balconies. Take 2 seconds and do it. 3, call Andrew or someone and figure out your dang insurance. Having a spreadsheet of 4 out of 200 owners who gave you a certificate of insurance saying that they had the right one is not sufficient. You're going to get stung. That's my old lawyer talking. And lastly, go read Peak, P-E-A-K by Chip Conley. It deeply transformed the way I thought about operating a vacation rental. It's a brilliant book about hospitality. And if you only read one, you'll learn a hell of a lot more from that than listening to me blab more. I think it was pretty impactful.
Thank you for coming on, Jason, too. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Andrew, take it away.
Yeah, I've got 2 things. First, what Jason says, start tracking. If you're not tracking it, you can't fix it. And just if you have awareness, are your guests happy? What are your maintenance issues? Whatever they are, you can start to fix it. And then the second one is just check your insurance. Don't care how you get it. We'd love to help you, but don't care how you get it. You need commercial insurance somehow. Those bad things do happen. So just look into it, send me a note. I'll look at your policy if you want me to, whatever. But just understand this is real. And by the time it becomes an issue, it's probably too late.
Excellent. Jeremy?
Awesome. We covered a lot of ground here. I will say I love what Andrew was saying about Lyric and mapping the customer journey, and we've encouraged people to do that as well. I would encourage you to do it. You might not do it today, right when if you're right in the middle of your high season, maybe today's not the day to do it, but I encourage you to sit down with your team, map the customer journey, and then think about where you're getting credit for really putting in human effort and what you can automate, and use that to help drive your technology decisions as you look at your technology stack.
Is hopefully you all have enjoyed the conversation today. Yes, we went up script about 10 minutes in, and it was fun to do so with you all. But the reason I wanted all three of you on is because I do think if you're a operator in our space, if you're building a business in our space, these are companies that's Key Data, Safely, and Breezeway that you just have to be talking to. These are people who know the industry inside and out, right? There are multi-decades of experience on this call. These are people I've learned from for years. It's been an honor to learn from them. So check out their companies. These are people who care about the space. They care about the long-term success of this space, and they're trying to solve problems. And at very worst, they're going to pass you on to another great service that could help you out as well. So please do check them out. Thank you all for
like Wheelhouse.
Oh yeah, like Wheelhouse too. We
Wheelhouse. Yeah.
Try our best. No, certainly. And honored to be on with you all. Jason, Andrew, Jeremy, thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be doing this again soon, but appreciate it and be well, okay?
Great to chat, guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, all. Take care. Be well.